Now, I don't know how you did it, Nick, but you seemed really calm, and I was already starting into a panic. What was going through your mind at that moment? Welcome and welcome back to In a Prosecco. I'm here with my son, Nick Slowey, who is joining me on this incredible journey through 35 epic days of an Antarctica cruise on Lindblad Expeditions, National Geographic. And I have my Prosecco. Cheers to you, Nick. We're going to continue our series of this mother-son voyage where we're going to explain a little bit of our experience on the cruise, not only what activities and just an insight on this cruise, but also really sharing stories, because there are definitely some things I would have done differently, as well as I really want to be able to offer a window into this opportunity that I have in traveling with my son, and what I'm learning so much about myself, but what I'm also learning about you, Nick. So let's get started. We left Sarasota, Florida for Miami because we wanted to take a direct flight overnight, and our flight was supposed to take off at 11 p.m. and arrive the next day in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so when Nick and I were thinking, okay, we want to spend as much time with our family, with Nick's dad and his brother, Jack, who was visiting from Colorado for the holidays, we wanted to make the most of the days. And so we left the same day as the flight, and I thought we'd have plenty of time. We booked a bus from Sarasota. It's a 3-hour drive, 3.5 hours, actually 4-hour drive to Miami. And I really wish I would have booked a different bus that was earlier. And then we also knew that the bus was going to be late, because the timing of the bus tracker was showing that it was going to be 40 minutes late, and we'd probably be 40 minutes late to the airport. Now, I don't know how you did it, Nick, but you seemed really calm, and I was already starting into a panic. What was going through your mind at that moment where we realized, the bus is already going to be picking us up late? We only gave ourselves about a 3-hour window for the international flight recommendation, which that had already closed into a 2-hour window. So what was your thought, realizing we were running late already?
In that moment, I was actually laughing in my head because my brother Jack and I had already discussed the process of getting to Miami. He asked why we were taking a bus instead of having him and my dad drive us, and I told him, well, it's an hour drive to Tampa, so you'd most likely be driving us there, but we're flying out internationally, so we're probably driving to Miami, and that's a 3-hour drive, and we're not going to make you guys do that. And he told me, well, why? It's our last day together. We should do that anyway. I said, that's what our plan is, so that's what we're going to do. And in the moment, I was sitting there laughing, thinking, wow, this all could have been avoided if I just listened to my brother and told my parents, well, if Jack wants to do the 6-hour commute there and back, might as well. But I really wasn't worried, because working for Lindblad, on the opposite side of things, I've seen how just focused and hardworking the people are to make sure that your cruise works out perfectly for you. So if you miss a flight, they do everything in their power to make sure that you're getting on that cruise, and they're trying to make sure that you have a really good experience regardless of how it starts.
Right, the stress of like those missed flights, which can happen in travel, that's going to happen. And when my first experience of a cruise, we did something similar where we drove from Sarasota to Fort Lauderdale, and we originally thought, we can get on the ship at 11, and if we just left at 7 a.m. and be able to make it on time. And I had this concern that, well, what if something happened? It's our first ever cruise, so we should stay the night before. And looking back, I would have either booked a bus that left in the morning so that we would have plenty of time. If anything, we would just like be bored and more waiting for our flight with ample time to fly out at 11 versus leaving at 5 p.m., getting in at 8, and then realizing, okay, we're not even going to get in until 9. But here's what happened. What I didn't consider is that it was just 3 days after the Christmas holiday travel, and I should say to be 3 days after Christmas. So there was still a lot of holiday travel. And the other thing to consider was that on a bus schedule, we're not in control of our time any longer. And so when we had our first stop at the Fort Lauderdale airport and we were flying out of Miami, there was so much traffic, holiday traffic, that delayed us another hour. So if not more, and it sent me into a total panic. And we're at the airport on the bus when Nick and I started to talk about, well, maybe we should just catch an Uber from the Florida airport to Miami, because we also looked at the drop off at the Miami airport, and it was going to be all the way across from where we'd be checking in to our Delta flight. So I went into a full-fledged panic. When we got off the bus, we called for an Uber, which was supposed to arrive in 7 minutes, and it was more like 37 minutes. So, Nick, tell me, how are you feeling in that moment?
Well, I knew we were going to miss our flight. There was nothing that could be done about it, but my mom was freaking out, so I told her to just do whatever made her feel best. Because if you break things down, really, the little things started to add up, but when you break it down, it really wasn't that much going on. Like being across the airport, the terminals for checking in are very easy to get to, 5-minute walk, but that wouldn't have mattered because we needed our baggage there 45 minutes ahead of time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to make the flight because they need to search through your bag and stuff when you're going international. So there was nothing that we could have done in that moment, but my mom was still having the little things kind of add up, and it created a mass panic. So,
for me,
yes,
you handled it.
I was thinking about
with aplomb.
I was thinking about what to do to get our next flight. The problem with getting to Buenos Aires and then going to Antarctica on the very next day is if we couldn't find a flight, then the cruise was over. That was the biggest issue. So most of the flights that we looked at didn't get us to Buenos Aires in time. We needed to leave our hotel at 3 a.m. the following day. So we needed a flight that morning that got us there that day so that we could have maybe 5 hours of sleep, get on another flight, and get to the boat. So when I was looking, I could not find any flights. I looked on Google Flights, I was looking at all of the other places, and I was just kind of checking off one thing after the other. And I think in that moment when the realization of, well, if we don't find another flight, then this trip really is over, my mom kicked into high gear and started doing her detective work that she's so good at, and started calling whoever she needed to call to make sure that our reservations were set for a hotel, which airport we were going to fly out of, the flight that got us there in time. My mom was able to set all of that up after the initial panic, and it all started to kind of smooth itself out within the following hours.
Well, you're saying that really nicely, Nikki, because Nick was the one that was holding it together. I did not. I had such high expectations for this trip because this is a 35-day, and it is called the 35-day Epic Antarctica Adventure. And so I was really kicking myself because I had not planned out, as I did on our first cruise that I did with Nick's dad, just to go to Fort Lauderdale to catch a week-long cruise. This was such a big deal, and to be able to go with you, Nick, that I was kicking myself, the woulda, coulda, shouldas of why didn't I just book an extra day ahead of time so we wouldn't have had to deal with the traffic. Secondly, then there was also the airport lines of people checking in that, that also because of the holidays, all those things to be considered that I didn't, and I felt like that was a big mistake, a major rookie mistake, and I lost it. I felt like I was hyperventilating, and all the while I'm texting with Nick's dad, and I'm saying, I can't believe this, I think we're gonna miss our flight, and I'm about to lose it, and Nick's holding it together, you're texting with dad, and here's the deal. In losing all of my composure, I was thinking about how I would have done things differently. I wish I would have done things differently. And your dad texted something that changed my mindset prolifically. And he said, at this time, your son needs you too.
It's a good way to put it.
I so admired how you were able to hold yourself together so well, and you've become this incredible traveler. And I realized, hey, this isn't just about me and this trip, that this was on a journey that we were going to experience together. And I was just so grateful that I beat myself up over something instead of going into that mode that you just described as, all right, it's now solution time. We can't be panicking about what already has happened. It's now time to focus on what we can do to find another flight. And thankfully, I called a credit card company travel service, and I had never even heard of the airline that was a direct flight the next morning, but they booked us a flight or a hotel that we could stay in overnight near the hotel or near the airport. We didn't get much sleep.
No,
we didn't
not
get
at all.
much sleep. And by the time we actually got to the hotel, then we had to leave. We were absolutely going to be certain we were going to be at the airport early.
Folks, while you're all upstairs in Sea Green.
Hi, everyone. We're back again because we did a pause while there was a ship announcement for afternoon tea. But as we were just sharing, we had to reschedule a flight, and we looked on Google Flights and there was nothing. So thankfully the travel agent was able to find a new flight the very next morning at 8 a.m. that would bring us into Buenos Aires at 7 p.m. We just needed to make it into Buenos Aires in time to leave at 3 a.m. for Ushuaia, Argentina, where we would then embark on the Endurance vessel. So even though we didn't get a lot of sleep, Nick, when we took that flight, that all-day flight, I know that we slept most of the way. There was such a sense of relief, though, because as much as I had panicked and we talked about, like, oh my gosh, buying a ticket, an airline ticket the day before is a very different price than if you plan it out. And the difference in the huge cost of our new airline tickets was worth it, because I just felt like there was no way I was missing this flight and this opportunity to go on this voyage with you. And so you were wonderful about being considerate with the additional expense. And I thought down the road, the trip would absolutely be worth it. And because you also learned that you had shipmates that were also going to be on the cruise. So explain that. How does that happen?
Well, I want to touch on something real quickly. In the moment, I didn't realize that this trip was now canceled for the future. So I was very much just ready to have the next trip where we go on another 35-day trip available for us, because it would be available for us. But
as an employee.
Yes, as an employee, which I will touch on in just a second. But we ended up canceling the rest of these Antarctica 35-day trips. So it was definitely meant to be for us to be here and enjoying Antarctica the way we haven't been able to.
Good point. This trip is the second to last 35-day adventure. The Endurance is going to make a return trip from New Zealand, where we disembark out of Dunedin, New Zealand, and will return to Ushuaia. And then they've canceled trips indefinitely because they just haven't been able to fill them because of the length of the the length of the cruise, but also it is very costly to join a cruise for 35 days throughout Antarctica. So great point.
And that's why I knew I would be able to get on any of these future ones, because as an employee with the benefit trip that I have, it's not a guaranteed trip that I get to go wherever I want to. It is, if a ship does not sell out, I can have one of the cabins that has not sold out for a reduced price, and I have to pay certain things. My mom has a reduced price, but certain things are paid for as well. So
You're basically covering port fees, your taxes, airline expenses, and we had to pay for our parkas, which usually gets included in the full paying passengers. And really the only other expense that we have to be out of pocket for ourselves are like the laundry and anything that we would purchase on the vessel.
yeah, we didn't know that Wi-Fi would be included. My old HM has been
What's
so
an
kind.
HM?
Hotel manager. I'm so used to the acronyms that I forget to explain what that is to everybody. Our hotel manager is the person that is in charge of all the stewards on board and is basically the one person that goes around and makes sure whatever you need specifically is taken care of, because they're in charge of all that. So the HM on my boat, Quest, took care of us and gave us complimentary Wi-Fi for the trip
As a crew member,
as a crew member. It's
additional
amazing.
benefit,
Mhm.
which has been, because then that way we could actually keep in touch and with our families at home, but also, as we will continue to share in another episode, what we've planned for the post Antarctica cruise as part of once we disembark. But once you found out, Nick, that you also had your roommates and other crewmates on the vessel, you were worried about, like, oh, am I going to really enjoy this trip? I mean, I have my mom, but then when you found out,
Well, I already knew that two of my roommates from Quest, Miranda and Grace, who are also deckhands, got this trip because we got it together on the same day. And as roommates, we were just happy to share that information. So originally I thought it was just going to be the three of us. And since they're hanging out all the time, since they're together, I didn't know if I would have to be hanging out with my mom or just kind of be on my own and have to go make friends with the other passengers. But I ended up being told, since we missed the first day, by my two roommates, that there were two other crew members that were passengers on this trip. One of those being my favorite bartender, Ray Ray, and the other being a brand new chief steward, Kennedy. And a chief steward is somebody who's in charge of the stewards that reports to the hotel manager. So they make sure all the stewards are doing their certain jobs, such as dining room, wait staff, or the hotel side of things of cleaning the rooms. So that's the kind of hierarchy: stew, chief stew, and then hotel manager. So it was really cool to have three different sides of the boat, because the bartender is its own separate job.
so when you explained who she was to me and introduced me to Ray Ray, you said, she's the reason why I drink. She makes incredible drinks.
I hate the taste of alcohol. I'm not a drinker in the slightest. But Ray Ray makes drinks that are worth drinking. It's not that she masks the taste of alcohol, she enhances it so that the drinks taste good. And it's really something that I haven't been able to find elsewhere. She makes magical drinks, and of course she says the magic ingredient is love. And she really makes every drink with love.
Yeah, and I can see that about her personality. And as we talk about, like, the importance of, like, the quality of food and the beverages, because, you know, being on a ship for 35 days, you work on your contract for 4 months and you're in close quarters, but for most passengers, this is a very unique experience. This is a trip where I've never been away from your dad as long, maybe 22 days at the most. So for this 35 and the extended trip beyond that, and then you being able to also have this time with a few of your favorite people from work has been a blessing. And that I've got to meet them and be able to hear stories from them, as well as just how endearing it has been to meet their plus ones. I'm your plus one, but the other moms that were also invited by the crew members on the ship. And so it really kind of worked out nicely that I was able to also have the opportunity to get to know your friends' moms and your shipmates, your roommates, your bunkmates from the quest. And so I have loved learning about the inside world that you've experienced with this last year as a deckhand. And I'm so proud of you, Nick, because everyone I've spoken to raves about you, about your work ethic and how much fun you are and just your personality. And, you know, that just makes me so proud. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to get to know you in that way, as well as with your crewmates. So let's go back to our itinerary because I'm just thrilled to be here finally, so that when we arrived to Buenos Aires, Nick, you were exactly right. So because it was overnight, that we called the emergency number for Lindblad and said, we missed our flight. This is what we have done to rebook. We will be in at around 7 to 8 p.m. getting through customs. When we arrived, we got a message from both Lindblad and your dad, who also called Lindblad on our behalf, that said, you will have a car service waiting for you after passing customs. And I even kept the sign. And so that it was a momentum, because I'm like, we're here. But it was probably about an hour drive to get to the hotel. And when we arrived, it was late. It was like 9 p.m. and all of the passengers had already met. They'd had a day tour of Buenos Aires, and we were supposed to have our bags out by 3 a.m. So we literally were at the airport from not even 4 hours before we had to make sure we were packed again and have the bags ready.
Yeah, so it's a great reason for us to go back to Buenos Aires, because we didn't get that tour, so there's always a reason to go back.
Great excuse. So what did we end up doing? We ended up
going to the hotel room, going to dinner, and then going straight to bed for 3 hours, about.
Yeah, the dinner was just you had a pizza, and I had a glass of Prosecco. Of course I did. And then the next morning, we woke up to meet with everyone for breakfast, and that was at 3:30 a.m., and you got to reunite with your crew members that were on the same trip, and then I immediately started meeting others. And of course, it's always an interesting thing where you're kind of looking around. Now, there are 100 other passengers on this voyage, and so I figured that we would get to know people, but it's those first days. It's like first day of school. When you're trying to see, like, okay, who am I going to connect with? You know, just learning about people's backgrounds. And so we didn't really get that much of a chance, because by the time that we ended up having breakfast, we're on another flight. And where are we going? From Buenos Aires
to Ushuaia.
Ushuaia is a port town. And what do you recall about Ushuaia? Because we didn't leave right away to embark on the Endurance. We actually arrived, we left for a 7:30 a.m. flight and got in around 10:30 a.m. to Ushuaia.
It was about a 3-hour flight. It was a small plane. We got off on the tarmac and went into the small airport to get our luggage. And then as soon as we got our luggage, the staff that were there had us just put the luggage together, like right next to the carousel, and had us go outside. So they don't want us worrying about our luggage at all. They say, we'll take care of it, don't worry about it. And we got on a bus, and they gave us a tour of Ushuaia. We went and visited a few spots. It was
the national park.
The national park. We stopped by a lake. which was beautiful. It was a great lake with these rolling mountains above it. It was amazing.
We'll share pictures. And it's the most southern point to be able to not only just play golf, they have a beautiful golf course near the national park, but it was also the most southern point of the South American continent.
Well, we didn't get there yet. We went through the national park, and then we went to the southernmost point and got on a catamaran there. And
For lunch.
yeah, the catamaran is also owned by National Geographic, Lindblad. They're owned by Lindblad, and they took us out into the Bay of Ushuaia. It's a little rocky, and we had an amazing lunch. Can't quite remember what it was, other than a tortilla soup, which had great spices in it. It was really good soup.
And you normally don't eat soup, so the fact that you were very complimentary about the soup. It was just a light meal, and we got to meet some of the passengers. And what was really wonderful is as we were approaching the port to see that there were actually 3 cruise lines there. Not just our beautiful vessel, the Endurance, but there was another one, a Celebrity, and then there was another,
I believe it was Viking that was also there.
and Viking. And so they only go as far as, I think, the Falkland Islands, maybe, perhaps.
The farthest that most cruise lines will go, including Lindblad, is the Antarctic Peninsula. Sometimes they'll go further and cross into 60 degrees south, which is considered the definition, like the world's definition of Antarctica is 60 degrees south. So sometimes they will go down past 60 degrees, but the peninsula is actually above that, and that is the continent of Antarctica. So most of the times they will go through all those small islands near Ushuaia down to the peninsula and then come back up.
In Ushuaia, they share so many things like the bay with Chile. And so there's this like...
Ushuaia is also known as El Fin de Mundo, which is the end of the world.
Yes, a nice fun fact that it was like, that's what I meant, the very tip of the South Americas. So when we were approaching, and I took video of it, we were approaching the vessel and just the excitement, all of us on the catamaran were so anticipating being able to get to our rooms. And so that's always the big favorite thing is you're doing embarkation day. And you know from your world, like what it means to get the boat ready, to get the ship ready for passengers. So as we were having our tour and going on the catamaran, what's happening when the crew and stews, all of the members of the Endurance is doing to get ready for us to arrive?
The reason that we have to get on in the afternoon is because the Endurance, or any boat for that matter in Lindblad, will, I would say a majority of the time, when they get to dock, they will be dropping off a cruise. Just like when we get off in Dunedin, we will be dropped off in the morning, then they will have the full day to get the boat completely turned around, which means all the rooms get completely cleaned. The stewards walk around and they wipe down everything, and I mean everything in each room. The deckhands, or the ABs, able-bodied seamen, will walk around the entire exterior and wash it down, get all of the soap off, get all of the soot, anything off. They'll get the windows re-cleaned. They'll walk through the balconies and make sure that the balconies are cleaned off. All the portholes will be cleaned. Basically, the entire boat gets renovated so that when the new guests get on in the afternoon, they have no idea that there was guests on before them that day.
Right, it's supposed to be this brand new experience to feel like, oh, we're special, that we're coming aboard to experience this for the first time on the vessel. And then once we were brought to our stateroom, of course, this is our home for the next 30 nights. And so we ended up unpacking, and the excitement of just even going on a tour of the vessel, which is absolutely beautiful. And we'll show images of the vessel that shows the X-bow, because it's an icebreaker. It's created to break through ice. And so the other thing that was really exciting for me is, this isn't a cruise where you have nightly entertainment. There's a room, a lecture room. It's the area where people convene. There are video monitors, and it's a circular lounge that is meant for lectures and being able to have a place to not only listen to the lectures, but nightly recaps. And so seeing that, there's 2 restaurants on the vessel. There's also a bar at one of the restaurants, and then there's a bar in the ice lounge where we convene for the lectures. There is a yoga studio, and there's morning stretches, and there's 2 massage therapists who also do the yoga. And what am I missing?
2 igloos, 2 hot tubs in the back.
Explain the igloos, which I stayed in one night.
The igloos are available for the guests to stay in for a night or more, depending on if other people don't want to do it. On this trip, most people have not because it's been so cold. Those igloos are not heated, but it's 2 domes on the back of the ship, both facing, one faces the starboard quarter, which is the right side at looking backwards. The quarter would be your backwards 45 degrees. So one of them is facing port side, the left side 45 degrees, and one of them is facing the starboard side 45 degrees. So you're looking out and you can see the stars if you're not down here in Antarctica and it's 24 hours a day, or you can watch the waves go by. Down here it's mostly just watching the ice go by, which sounds not as interesting as it really is. Once you get down here and you see the ice, it's not just ice. It's something much more.
Yes, as they say, that most people who come to Antarctica are interested in the wildlife with all of the penguins and the seals, but of course the whales, the killer whales, the humpback whales, and the blue whale that we got to see, which we'll talk a little bit more in another episode about the itinerary for the first third of the way. And the igloo, I want to go back to that because I did stay overnight. Nick opted out of it. And so because they have 2 of them, you do register. There are the suites that get access to them first, and then everyone else can register for an evening. And so I stayed for maybe a good 4 or 5 hours, and I got too cold because they do give you ample blankets, and you have access to 2 hot water bottles. And being able to look out in the stars. And the night that I had it, it was the first time that we were actually going to break ice, and I was really interested in that. But then it's at the back of the ship, and so I never got to see it anyway, and I couldn't sleep in the lighting because there is no nighttime in the summer in Antarctica. So I ended up coming back to the cabin, in which we'll have to do a quick tour of the cabin as part of one of our episodes too. But I think, Nikki, this is a good place to actually stop, because I think that once we are able to, give everyone in a perspective of what it meant to come here. But I want to just say one more thing as far as the excitement and the buildup of this. We had our first hurdle, missing our first flight, but everything else has seemed to have gone so smoothly. The crew and the staff are just incredible. I think you're on the bridge probably 5 times a day.
Or I can be.
And so we want to be able to go into another episode and kind of talking about more of the itinerary and our experiences with each day, because as an expedition cruise, as I was explaining, that this isn't a typical cruise where you have the nightly entertainment. This is truly where it is about exploration and getting a lot of education about the early explorers, as well as so much information that we learn about the wildlife. That has been incredible. And I didn't think I was going to enjoy the lectures. I absolutely do. These are some of the top naturalist photographers. We have a National Geographic photographer on board, as well as one of Lindblad's finest photographers. The fact that the naturalists who have been here with Lindblad for 30 plus years there is some real talent that they and thought. And our expedition leader, Russ, is top notch. He is one of the best in the industry. I feel really fortunate about the places that we're going, that we have been to. So we're going to go into another episode about some of the things that we've done, just even in the first 10 days. It's been extraordinary. So please, if you like...
Hold on.
Wait, okay.
Just to give you guys a little something to look forward to, these guys are the most well-traveled to Antarctica people that you could have. They've been down to Antarctica more times than you or I could count or even fathom. They know more about this place than anybody else on the world. And one of the very first things that they told us is, on this expedition, we will go to places that they've never been to. And they're seeing a first just as we are. So this cruise really was special and goes to such extraordinary and amazing places that have really been untouched by people.
And one of those places that everyone is excited to see is the Ross Shelf.
Ice shelf.
Ice shelf, and we will talk more about that, and even just about what we've learned about icebergs, because it's pretty incredible. People say that they come for the wildlife, but they return for the icebergs. So join us on our next episode. If you enjoyed this one, please do like, share, comment, and certainly join us again on our next episode of In a Prosecco, where the truth serum comes out. Cheers. See you next time.
Last bit.